Inside the halls of San Diego State University lies a program dedicated to storytelling and pursuing the truth. Welcome to Where You At, a podcast that takes you inside the work of alumni for the School of Journalism and Media Studies at San Diego State. Our goal is to show the success of our alumni, inspire students with the stories, and connect students and alums on a pathway to journalism success. And now, here's your host, Josh Suchon.
This week on the Where You At podcast, we are remaining in America's finest city, and I'm excited about this week's podcast. We have a wide array of communications topics: public relations, digital marketing, content creation, and also the world of nonprofit and community solutions. Our guest this week is the ultimate Aztec, Lorena Nava Ruggero. She got her bachelor's at San Diego State. She got her master's at San Diego State. She worked at San Diego State as a lecturer. She was part of San Diego State's News Center, editor of new media, launched a YouTube channel. These days, she is the director of communications at San Diego Foundation. Lorena, welcome to the Where You At podcast, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So this is a really fun full circle moment because a long time ago, when YouTube was just starting, Lorena was part of San Diego State's News Center, and she interviewed me on campus, and now the tables are turned, Lorena, and now I get to grill you with all the questions.
I'm ready for it. Bring it on.
All right, let me start with this. Your work with the San Diego Foundation. I kind of want to dive into this right away. First of all, give us the big picture view of what you do, what the San Diego Foundation is, and what you do for the San Diego Foundation.
Sure. So San Diego Foundation inspires enduring philanthropy and enables community solutions that improve the quality of life in our region. Basically, we try to make life better for San Diegans. And there I'm director of communications, where I manage public relations and content production. So if you visited our website, followed us on social, or heard about us in the news, my team and I are behind that.
Well, when it comes to the news, the floods, the unusual amount of rain that has hit Southern California and San Diego has been quite significant. Tell us about when, especially the personal reaction for you, when you see that it's raining. How does your mind work both as a person and as a professional?
You know, my time at San Diego State University and at Grossmont College, I was actually involved in a lot of crisis communications. So when you work on a big campus and things are happening in the community, you kind of have to be ready to respond. So, I was eating lunch at home. I work from home most days. I go into the office once a week, but that day I was home and I just noticed it was raining really hard outside. So I turned on the news, and we can always guarantee that no matter what, if it is raining heavily in San Diego, the news is on it and they're talking about storm watch. And so I'm expecting to see that kind of coverage. And what I see instead is devastating flooding in southeastern San Diego, honestly, minutes from where my grandparents live in National City. And so I'm watching the news. I'm seeing people walking around in 6-foot water. Or 5, I think it was 4 to 6 feet in some areas. And so I call my grandparents, check on them. They're in National City. They're fine, thankfully, but not everyone was. And so I went into the office the next day, actually, and I asked, what are we going to do to help? Because I just had a feeling that we should, because that's the kind of organization we are. We care about our community. And later that week, we actually activated the San Diego Flood Response Fund. And we quickly fundraised over $1 million from donors throughout the region. Everything from just people giving what they could online through our website, all the way to corporate donors, other foundations giving tens of thousands of dollars. And we quickly deployed that out to the nonprofits who were providing basically food and shelter to people who had been left homeless and had escaped the flooding with only what they had on their backs. And so we did that in about a month and a half until FEMA assistance came into the county, and we sunset the fund. You know, it was really important for us to help the community when they needed it, help our nonprofit partners who were basically doing this work just to help the people that they serve in their communities. And that was really personally meaningful to me. And of course, you know, my work in all of this is, you know, my coworkers are the ones that are doing the fundraising and getting the money out the door. But I have to get the word out about how people can donate to the fund and being transparent about how their donations were being used to help those in need. And 100% of the dollars that we raised went out to nonprofits helping people in need. And since we launched the fund, which I believe was Thursday that week, I want to say it was the January 24th, if I remember correctly, up until we sunset it earlier this month, we had about 250 media placements, 30 million impressions and an estimated media value about $750,000.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. And, a lot of people, my colleagues are part always saying like, oh, you did such a great job. And I have a saying that I always use with them. And I'm like, do compelling work, tell compelling stories. If they're not doing compelling work, I can't tell a story. And since we do such important work, it makes it very easy for me to do my job of telling these stories and telling the community about how we're helping and how they can get involved with us doing that help.
Let me follow up by asking you about a phrase that you said, which was getting the word out. Nowadays, there are so many different ways to get the word out, but yet I feel like it becomes harder and harder because there's so many different ways. And it's so easy for people to ignore messages, but yet they get inundated with messages. People are constantly on their phones scrolling, but how do you get them to stop? And so, what are some of the principles that you use at San Diego Foundation to try to get the word out in meaningful ways so it's not just someone pressing like and then quickly moving on to the next thing that they like, but also being able to actually do something about it?
We have a PR plan for everything. The students that I used to teach, because I used to teach the strategic PR planning course, will not be surprised by this. It's always plan the work and work the plan. So we always have a plan for this kind of work, and we really focus on our paid, earned, shared, and owned channels. So we have a pretty robust marketing and communications department at San Diego Foundation, especially in comparison to other nonprofits and community foundations. And so we each, take on our piece of the work and we execute. And we always focus on the same thing we all should be doing, which is audiences, goals, key messages, and then what's your call to action. And we always want to make sure that any message that we put out into the world, we tell people this is where you can go to do something, whatever the behavior is. So on our socials, of course, we post the links to where to donate, or we tell people like learn more about the work that we're doing. My colleagues who put out our newsletters on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, are making sure that our email marketing reflects that. And even when we go on the news, it's always making sure drop in the URL, make sure that you're saying it correctly, and that people know that we'll take any donation. And if you can't donate, then here's other ways you can give your time or talent to support the causes that you care about.
All right. So we just learned a little bit about what Lorena does right now, and we're going to end back with what she does. But now I want to rewind because, again, you are San Diego State through and through. You mentioned that your grandparents are from National City. So tell us about growing up in San Diego, and was it always in the cards that you would remain in San Diego for college or what?
Oh, such a good question. So I should start. You mentioned that I am an Aztec through and through. I never wanted to go to San Diego State when I was in high school. I am actually a third generation alumna. My grandfather went to SDSU, but my parents went to SDSU. I have aunts and uncles who went to SDSU. I think when I worked there and when I was a student, I had at least one cousin attending SDSU at any given time. And I actually grew up just north of campus over in LA Gardens. And so I wanted nothing to do with San Diego State, actually, which is very amusing to my parents now. But my plan when I graduated from high school actually was to move to New York City and study theater. And I was ready to go do so until I got my financial aid package from a small private liberal arts college located in Greenwich Village. So all of those words in that sentence should go, it was really expensive. And my parents refused to, this is in 1990s dollars for those listening at home. My parents refused to co-sign onto $30,000 in annual loans. So that wasn't an option. And in true theater kid style, I got dramatic and ended up attending my local community college at Grossmont College. And it actually ended up being the best place for me to go at the time. I went there and I took a career aptitude test, found out I might have a talent, be successful in media studies. And so I took some like intro to mass media and society classes, found it really fascinating. I went to the transfer center on campus and looked at the various media majors at San Diego State because it was close, it was local, and it was going to be affordable. And I decided just kind of like, I guess I'll major in this thing called public relations. It seems like there's a lot of variety of work and, it looks interesting. We'll just do that. And so I did. I really did not know much about the program when I transferred. But once I got there, I was convinced I had made the right choice. And Dr. Broom helped convince me of that too when I met with him over the summer before I fully enrolled.
Oh, I just love hearing the name Dr. Broom. How long does it take before the theater kid Do you ever get the theater out of you as you're transitioning into this world of public relations and communications, or is that drama still always there in some ways?
I think every time I give a presentation, I always try to engage the audience. I try to remember, my lines, my script, my talking points is what I would call them now. And, it's funny. I actually had the pleasure at Grossmont College of working with our student commencement speaker every year and helping them with their speech that they gave at commencement. And, today I help my direct reports practice their presentations, give them tips, because theater kids, we're not scared to be in the spotlight. I don't want to be in the spotlight now. I promise you, this is an anomaly that I'm giving this interview, but really using that skill to help other people be less afraid to be on stage and to share the important information they need to share.
I look back on some of the classes that I took at San Diego State that helped me become a journalist, that helped me become a broadcaster, that were not within the journalism department. I think about acting for non-majors and how important that was. Some of the straight communication classes, some of the history classes where we had to give different group presentations and things like that. And so for you, Lorena, just what are some of the classes that really had an impact on you, whether it was classmates, whether it was professors, whether it's just things that just really helped shape who you are?
That is a really good question. Actually, my first semester at Grossmont College, I took a intro to public speaking class. I was still, had that chip on my shoulder as a student and was like, oh, I want to do theater, but here I am at this place and hadn't found my love just quite yet for Grossmont College. And I had a speech professor. The way that they ran the classes, it was like a joint course with an English class, and they focused on mass media. And so I kind of got engaged in the coursework because the professor was always trying to connect to what we were doing to media studies. And that's where that interest, that spark first started for me. And she was just such an amazing teacher that really engaged me in public speaking, but then also in exploring, this world of mass media. Other classes, very well remember my news writing teacher at Grossmont College. He was I think the retired editor of the opinion section of the UT. I remember hating that class. I did not enjoy it. And part of it was just, again, you're a teenager, you're kind of blasé about a lot of things, but and he used to call roll by having us recite things from this one sheet that we had to memorize. And one of those things is the top 10 news values. I remember today the top 10 news values. When I went to work at Grossmont College, he was still there. And I went up to him and I said, I thanked him for drilling that stuff into our heads, because the fundamentals of news and the inverted pyramid, no matter how the media landscape has changed since then, in the 20 plus years since that time, the media and news values stay the same. And so it's kind of like those building blocks and basics of like my interest in it and being able to tell a story that's compelling is due to those very, very early classes. And then certainly, going on through my coursework, at San Diego State University, I'll be honest, any class that I had with Dr. Broom or Dr. Dozier were just my favorite things. Even JMS 581, which is like the research design course. I loved it so much. And I didn't realize I had performed so well in it up until Dr. Dozier asked me to teach a lab for it when I was a grad student. I'm like, why are you asking me to do this? He was like, actually, you were the best student in the class at the time. And I still remember being very surprised by that. I'm like, I didn't think it was that hard, but it is. It's a hard class. We have a hard program. And I don't think I fully appreciated that until I started teaching and I realized like, oh, this is difficult. Like my experience had always been like this almost seemed too natural for me, which again, just goes back to how lucky I am that I picked the right path for myself at the time that I did.
I can relate to a lot of what you're saying, even if it's different classrooms and different professors. I think about Professor Buckaloo and Professor Spivak and Professor Wolfmeyer, and how often it was extremely humbling when they told me that my work was not as good as I thought it was. And I thought that I was a big shot because I was over at the Daily Aztec and I got this whole thing figured out. And then they would point out all of the mistakes that I would make in a story. And I did not like it one bit at the time, but then I look back on it and I go, okay, these professors made me better. They made me so much better, even if young Josh didn't really want to be told that he wasn't as good as he thought he was.
It is a humbling experience to work with the journalism professors anywhere, I think.
Yeah. So you mentioned going and teaching a lab. And so let me get into the next stage of your educational experience, because everyone's journey is a little bit different. And for me, I was never a great student. I couldn't wait to just get out and I just want to start doing journalism. I just want to do something that's out there. But you decided to continue on and get your master's. Tell us about why you made that decision and ultimately how it helped.
I graduated with my bachelor's degree in 2004. I came back to the university as an employee in 2005. And one of the benefits that they had back then, which they still may have, is actually 6 free units of coursework for you or a dependent. And so I had thought about teaching. That career assessment test that I had taken many years ago had said, you might be good at teaching. And I said, no, maybe that's something I should explore a little bit more. And so I went to get my master's degree so I could teach. At the community college level, you need at least a master's degree. And so I went through the coursework and did it. And part of it is just professional growth. I'm kind of like a lifelong learner. I always want to learn something new. I think, frankly, we can all become better writers. We can all become better at our job. And learning is a big piece of that. And so I had the opportunity to enroll in the master's program. And I finally got to take a class with Dr. Shaw because she had actually started as a full-time faculty member the year after I graduated. And I remember the stories I would hear from my classmates after I had graduated and, really enjoyed my time with her and taking classes with her. Same thing with Professor Arsenault and other folks that I had my master's degree experience with. It was really fulfilling in that way.
You were also at San Diego State as an employee at what I think is a really pivotal time, 2008 through 2012. And I want to get your perspective, but I know, at least for me, I look back on those years and I didn't really, at the time, necessarily understand how fast new media was growing in terms of YouTube and social media and how it went from just kind of like this fun thing that you did with your friends and then how it really started to grow in different ways. And so give me your experiences about there's all this new media that is growing and how we can tell San Diego State's story through it.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about that time was we had basically reorganized our department at the time. And this new job of editor of new media was one that I got promoted into. I'd done media relations for the university for, I think, about 3 years. And then this new position opens up and we started News Center. It was like the first of its kind at the time. Now I feel like, there's the County of San Diego News Center, other universities, organizations have news centers, but we were one of the first back then. And the reason behind that was the media landscape was changing so much in San Diego at the time. And you're seeing media consolidation already happening. Smaller newspapers were dying off, like small local community newspapers. UT, it just happened almost cyclically at the UT where they have layoffs and reporters are forced to cover more beats, have less experience in a specific beat. And so we were just seeing like there's fewer reporters to tell our story. So how can we tell it for ourselves and kind of taking that locus of control and going, how can we change this narrative to our own benefit? And that's what public relations is in a lot of ways is, how do we tell our own story? And so I got to launch News Center. I got to launch our YouTube channel. We did a podcast back then. It did not live on up until this one. Obviously other podcasts have been created at the university, but that one at the time didn't work out. But it was just a really cool time and a really amazing experience to have people above me, Greg Block, Jack Beresford, who were willing to let us try new things and see what resonated with our audiences. And not everything worked out, but it's where I learned how to take chances and see what worked and what didn't in real time.
Okay, you just said Greg Block. May he rest in peace. He's one of my best, dearest friends of all time. So please tell me more stories about my dear friend, Greg Block.
Oh my goodness. Greg loved social media. He is the reason I got a Twitter, RIP Twitter account way back when. I remember Greg's enthusiasm for just learning new things. And it was really cool to have a boss who was possibly even more interested in these things than I might have been at the time. And I actually did some research as part of my graduate degree on social media networks. And here I have this boss who's like so into, he's like, let me show you this new cool thing and stuff. And his enthusiasm was infectious. And, I think the thing that really lasted with me though, throughout my career was Greg and his work-life balance and his family. Because at the time, his youngest was in the childcare center at SDSU. And we got to experience like him being a dad and really bringing his whole self to work. And now for me, I have kids of my own and had my own son in the children's center when I worked at SDSU and stuff. And it's really one of those things where when you see a boss emulate the kind of work balance that you want to have, work-life balance that you want to have later on. And I've been able to do that. And I've tried to be that boss to my direct reports too, and kind of like think about it. The one thing I will say that is kind of like my full circle moment is I remember when Greg came over to San Diego State, he had just finished this major, amazing project of transforming the Naval Training Center grounds into Liberty Station. And he had all this enthusiasm from this project and everything. And I remember being like, wow, this guy is really, really interested in this place that he had just finished up. And that's where the San Diego Foundation offices are now. And that's where I work when I go into the office is at Liberty Station. So, when I, walk through the halls sometimes, I think of Greg and think of how excited he would be to see the kind of vibrant community and culture that we have in Liberty Station. It's because people like him did this work so many years ago.
Okay, I need to change the topic or else I'm going to start crying.
Sorry, Josh.
That's okay. When it comes to organizations, whether it's San Diego State or San Diego Foundation, creating their own news, and I'll even give my own. I work for a minor league baseball team here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we just don't get the quantity of media coverage that we used to because that just doesn't exist. There used to be 2 newspapers. Now there's 1, and the one doesn't come out and cover us on a regular basis. And when it comes to the TV stations, we still get way more media coverage than almost any other minor league baseball team does. But when I look at our staff and the different things that we do, like yesterday, we wanted to show off all of the different new food items that we're going to have at the ballpark. And so that was our staff creating content. And almost everyone from our communications staff are all former journalists, or they have some type of journalism background. And to me, it's really fun because I may not have like this super hardcore journalism hat on anymore, but we're creating journalism. We're creating this content in order to get the word out because, again, whether it's the Albuquerque Isotopes or the San Diego Foundation, you kind of have to tell your own story in order to get the word out because of consolidating media.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I joined San Diego Foundation, one of the very first things I worked on were some videos. We were doing virtual annual meetings, basically, with all of our donors. And so I had to help produce this program. I want to say it was like 30 to 40 minutes long, and worked with a local media production company. And we did this, all under the auspices of COVID, because I started in 2021 and stuff. And, it was that experience. And we realized between me and another colleague and the director of digital marketing in my department, we put our heads together and we were like, video is such a compelling way of telling a story. How can we do more of this? And we actually were able to hire on a full-time videographer, unheard of in community foundations and in nonprofits to have somebody who's wholly dedicated to this. And she's a former broadcast reporter, actually worked in a lot of different media markets and now works for us. And, it's one of those things that you have to think about is, we could certainly still tell our story with just photos and with just, beautiful online or print storytelling, but video captures people's attention so quickly. And I think we're seeing this with, all the new social media content coming out through Reels on Instagram and TikTok, that short form video is really a way to capture people's attention and then hopefully pull them into learning more about your story. Like, come and see the long form of this. And so I think the more that organizations can visually tell their stories, especially knowing what social media is kind of doing to our attention spans, is really going to be, I think, a more important part of our futures is as storytellers. And it doesn't mean that the long, compelling story no longer exists. It just means that's the taste you give them. And then people that want to drill deeper into the story will then come to your website. And, I'll be very honest, it's content marketing too. Like, we get people into our website and we get them into our marketing funnel because we want them to do a thing, whether it's donate, consider starting a fund with us, or supporting a nonprofit cause or organization that's important to them.
All right, I realize I'm kind of bouncing all over the place, but I want to go back to you teaching at San Diego State and lecturing. And you mentioned different classes that you had that you may have not loved at the time, but you go back and you thank the professors later. When it was your turn to stand in front of this class and to teach and influence and guide these young minds, what was your sort of balancing act between, well, this is what I liked as a student, but this is what I think is best now as a lecturer?
Yeah. So, the really fun part about teaching is you have learning objectives. There's stuff these students need to know before they step foot out of your class for the semester. So, and I say this as both somebody who wants to support them learning, but also as a possible future employer or friends or colleagues or other alumni who are going to be hiring these students. I want the quality of that SDSU degree to be high caliber, and that those employers know that those students are going to come in with skill sets that they know how to write a news release, they know how to write, different types of things, they know what a PR plan is, they know, the things that you need to know how to do really well, right? And so that's the balancing act. And it's kind of like, with me, it was always absolutely like, hey, I'm going to teach you this really tough thing, but we're going to do it in a fun way. So, with my students, it was always trying to do the balancing act of like, are there multiple ways you can demonstrate, this knowledge? You know what I mean? It's not like you don't just have to take an exam and just write a thing. Like, why don't we talk about it in class? So it was always, trying to have engaging discussions with students. At the end of the semester, because I always taught in the fall, at the end of the semester, they had to do a presentation for their PR plan. And no student enjoys doing that because they're like done with the semester. They're like, I'm ready to walk out that door. So I'd always bring like a bunch of holiday snacks, and I'd bring all of this kind of like the photo booth accessories of holiday stuff. And I tell them, if you wear one of these things, you can get some extra credit points. And so everyone ends up wearing like the silly sweater or the silly hat. And so people are automatically already happy that they get to be there too with each other. And it's really about just like, share about what you worked on this semester. Tell us about what you learned and stuff. And so it's always that balancing act. And I will say that the most rewarding part probably of teaching is I get to see where my students are now, and seeing that they're directors of their own in their organizations, or they're VPs of something, or they're just really, doing something else too. Some students don't stick with PR, and that's okay too, but seeing how engaged they are in the work that they're doing, and that I had a small role to play in all of that, that joy and professional growth is really rewarding.
I think it's really neat when you touched on wanting to make sure that the education is really good, and that you use better words than I just did. And that the idea that I look back on what it took to get into San Diego State in the late 80s to early 90s, and what it takes to get into San Diego State now. And I feel, number one, lucky that I got in when I did, but number two, just proud of the way that the university has grown and what the standards are, and how the standards continue to get stronger and better, how it's more difficult to get in, and the education continues to get better and better. And so I'm curious if you can describe in your own words, like what you've seen in terms of the prestige of the university, especially JMS, growing as more and more students get into this and learn from you.
Yeah, so I will first note, I did not know when I enrolled in the PR program that it was one of the top PR programs for undergrads in the country. No idea. I'm like, I have a textbook that I've been sharing with my colleagues of effective public relations. And oh, by the way, one of the authors on it is the guy teaching you this semester, right? So I think we've always had a really rigorous program. But I think the thing that has changed over the years is making sure that it's not just like rigor to scare you or to be punitive. I think it's rigor to be like, we uphold you to the standard because we know you can do it. We know you can be the PR professionals that our world needs, that our workforce needs. And so, I have, when I worked at Grossmont College, I had a colleague, and I had worked with him actually at San Diego State many, many years ago. We had worked together on commencement day. That's a fun story. But in any case, I remember him saying always to like, you can give a student a failing mark, but that doesn't mean you have to be mean about it. Like, you can still smile with them and hug them and go, look, I know you can do better than this. And that's what I always told my students when I had, because AP style, big deal in the writing classes. And you would get points taken off for every AP style mistake. And I promise you, I did not feel good about the use of that red pen on students' papers, and they would get failing grades. And they would come to me and they would, I always invited students to challenge their grades. Like, please come and talk to me about it. If you can make a compelling argument, I will give you the points back. But, sometimes that compelling argument didn't happen. And I said, this is what it is, but I hold you to the standard because I know you can meet it. You have to. You've already made it this far. This is not the class where things are going to fall apart. This is just, you got to bend down the hatches, get serious, and do it. And I will give you all the help that you need to make sure that you get to that finish line. I was very lucky. I think in the entire time that I taught at San Diego State over the years, I think I had one student that I had failed. And frankly, I found out later that the student had failed a couple of times in the same class, and it just wasn't a class that was working for them for whatever reason with many other professors. And so I take that to heart, meaning that, the standard that we hold our students to is rigorous, it is high, but our students can do it. They're excellent students when they get to San Diego State. And by the time they make it to these classes, you can do this. You just got to focus. And it's hard when March Madness is happening and senioritis starts stepping in. I get it, but it's important, I think. And again, it's really to make sure the students can be employable and that employers can trust that they're going to have great employees out of our program.
You make me wish that you had taught me when I was at San Diego State. I would not be doing a very good job of an interviewer if I did not follow up, because you said you worked with someone about commencement day and that was a fun story. Please tell that story and what makes it a fun story.
Sure. So during this amazing new media time at San Diego State University, when I was doing media relations and when I was editor of new media, so San Diego State, unsurprisingly, has like 3 days of commencement, and you were literally running up and down the stairs of either inside Viejas Arena or outside of Viejas Arena, and that is not easy. I think the hottest, sweatiest days are always commencement. And so I had the pleasure of also hosting live stream. We did live stream YouTube videos back then. And we did interviews with students in LWAT right behind Viejas Arena. And they were also simultaneously broadcast on the Jumbotron inside the arena so that all the families and friends waiting inside for the ceremony to start could watch all of this lovely interviewing that I'm sure I did back then. And, we always scheduled interviews with like Dr. Weber, again, may he rest in peace. We interviewed him. I had my colleagues, and this colleague specifically I mentioned earlier was with the Career Center on campus, and he would come in and talk about like, what does the job prospects look like for this year's graduating class? And we would do interviews with students and deans and, all the honorary degree recipients at every commencement ceremony. And, it was such a long, tiring weekend. But it was my favorite simply because this is the day we all wait for when our students walk across that stage and they have that moment of celebration. And again, knowing that my job, like it's hard to go, what does a PR person have to do with student success? My job, the way that I always looked at it was, I want that student's degree to be the most valuable that it can be when they go out into the world. People are going to know what it means to have an SDSU degree so that they can be, again, more employable, get high quality jobs and, contribute to our local economy and, frankly, national global economies. But really celebrating that moment with them and knowing that this is just the beginning for them. That's what commencement is. It's literally the beginning. Everyone thinks of it as an end, but it's the beginning of everything else.
I always try to make this podcast as informational as possible. And so I want you to speak to what people should think about if maybe they're thinking about becoming a teacher and becoming a lecturer, becoming a professor, whether that's someone who's a student right now who might follow your same path, or whether it's someone who has been a working professional for decades and is starting to think, well, maybe there's things that I've learned out in the field that I can teach to students. What should individuals know who are thinking about teaching know?
I think if you're thinking about teaching, it's a commitment. It's going to take you away, not just the time that you're in the classroom. It's going to take away the time that you're grading, the time that you're prepping for classes, when you're putting together your curriculum, all that other stuff. They always tell students, like when you take a 3-unit class, you also got to plan for like 3 more hours of work on top of that just to meet, whatever the standards are for the class. It's the same thing for the professors, if not more. But I will say that, if you have experience and wisdom that you want to bring to students to help young people grow, for me, a big part of my teaching too has been growing the diversity within our field, making sure that students know, like, yes, you can be a community college student and make it through this program. You can be a person of color and make it through this program, and really contributing to that success, that wider success for people. I think that that's a really, really important part of what we do. And if you can't teach for whatever reason, maybe it's too much of a time commitment, consider mentoring. I know that our local professional organization, San Diego State University, has great mentoring mentoring programs, that if you want to get involved, there's a way for you to do that. And again, just help grow people in their careers. And I will tell you, when I worked at Grossmont College, and you always get those interview requests from students that are working on a paper about, oh, I need to interview somebody that's working in the field. And I would get a ton of them at Grossmont College. And I always found out that they were like straight up journalism majors. And I'm like, let me tell you about public relations. I think you would be great at it and stuff. And so that's the other piece of it, is just bringing more people to a profession that holds a lot of mystery, and demystifying it for them just helps wider understanding of the kind of work we do and the kind of change that we can make in the world.
I just want to quickly piggyback on what Lorena just said when it comes to the diversity, but also in my world of sports, broadcasting, and journalism, I'll say all the time, just because you're a former athlete doesn't mean that you can only be an analyst in your sport. You can work in other sports. Just because you're a female doesn't mean you have to be the sideline reporter. Doesn't mean that you have to be the community relations person. You can do play-by-play. Fortunately, there's more and more who are getting these opportunities and who are showing that they can do that. So I also think that within that is reminding people, don't just feel pigeonholed within a niche, that there's a lot of different things that you can do. And I think it's cool that there's so many more opportunities that are existing that maybe didn't in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, if you're a journalism student, all the content production skills that you learn in the classroom absolutely apply to public relations. Frankly, any writing skill that you develop as a student in our programs is going to benefit you in the future, because you're going to be able to distill that big, complicated message into understandable terms for your boss, for your coworkers, for other people, in your organization. And that's a really important thing, is helping people understand complicated things. Like, you can do that in any job, frankly. And I think that, we all have, I think, big grand designs for our careers when we start, but it's also knowing that, like, you don't have to just do that. If I really think about it, I've had the opportunity to teach. I've been a freelance writer, for San Diego City Beat, our dearly missed Alternative News Weekly here in San Diego. I've written for other publications. I've been a consultant for other organizations that needed some help with, helping people just do PR a little bit better and stuff. And so, I started off in an agency, and I remember Dr. Broom saying at one point, like, you're going to be the president of an agency someday. And I'm like, okay, Dr. Broom, like, if you say so. Like, I don't think that there was anything that surprised me about Dr. Broom throughout my entire time, because he was just always so positive and encouraging for all of us students. But I remember thinking, like, oh, I'm going to join an agency and I'm going to, make it all the way, sort of a thing. And while I did join an agency, I joined Allison and Partners. Actually, was my first job out of San Diego State when I graduated, and now known as Allison. And I realized that it wasn't for me, and that was okay. And so that's when I got to come back to San Diego State and, do some amazing work that I'm very proud of to this day. And frankly, I've been connected with people from that part of my career throughout my entire career up until now. And, now they're colleagues. They're not, my boss or my mentors and stuff, which is a really fascinating place to be now.
All right, we're going to start to wrap things up here. But before we shut down this podcast for this episode, anything else that I should have mentioned that I did not ask you that you would like to impart about this overall discussion that we've had about San Diego State and education and PR and creating content that I should have asked you?
You asked me a lot of things, Josh. I think we're good.
Okay. All right. Well, the way that we like to wrap things up is to brag about other San Diego State alums and give a shout out to them. And so the floor is yours first to hype up whoever it is that you would like to celebrate.
Sure. I'll start with some student entrepreneurs, because I covered them when they first started their companies. These little tiny companies called Blenders. I think they produce sunglasses. I think that there's some national coverage of their products. Same thing with Pura Vida and all of their jewelry and things. And so that, again, it's just really fascinating to see these students whose stories I got to tell at launch are now doing these big things. Lalo Alcaraz, he is a comics artist, and he produces a national comic called La Cucaracha. And he actually was one of the co-writers for a movie I watched on Netflix with my kids over the weekend of the Casa Grandes. And so it's just these little things. I got to interview him for the 360 magazine years and years ago and stuff. And so it's all these stories that I got to tell, and these people are still doing amazing things. And then I would be remiss if I did not mention the men's basketball team. so excited for what they did on the national stage last year, and I hope they make it all the way to the championship this year too.
I have multiple pairs of Blender sunglasses, and I think it's super cool that Chase started his company and that there's now an NIL deal with our basketball team as well. And so I think that that's just super awesome.
Yeah. If I had thought ahead, I would have put on my Blender sunglasses right now.
For the San Diego State alum that I'm going to brag about, it's someone similar to Lorena, and that's someone who went to school at San Diego State and it works at San Diego State. His name is Tim Grenda. Tim worked with me at the Daily Aztec in the early 90s. Tim was at the arts and entertainment section. And what made Tim really cool is that it just felt like he got along with everyone. Like he got along with the opinion staff, arts and entertainment. He talked with the sports staff, the news staff. And out of all of the articles that Tim wrote, he was always interesting because, oh, what free concert do you get to go attend, Tim? And do you need an assistant at this free concert? Or what movie are you going to see? But I'll never forget, Tim interviewed this young comic that I'd kind of heard of a little bit, and his name was Jon Stewart. And once I heard this name, I went, oh, that is so cool that Jon Stewart is talking in the Daily Aztec. I think I'm going to follow this guy, Jon Stewart, in case he has some type of national following at some point in his life. And that was back in the days when there was like these small digital recorders that you would connect to the phone somehow. So I remember listening back to the interview with Jon Stewart, and Jon Stewart knew Marshall Faulk, and they started talking about Marshall Faulk during the interview. And I was like, man, I like this guy, Jon Stewart. I'm definitely going to pay attention to this guy's career. Well, Tim Grenda, he worked for newspapers and he's done a little bit of everything. These days, he works for San Diego State in terms of search engine optimization and content manager on campus. He's a huge basketball fan and he's a good friend. And so shout out to Tim Grenda for introducing me to a young comic by the name of Jon Stewart, who hopefully ended up having a decent career.
I can only hope.
All right, Lorena, thank you so much for being generous with your time and all of your advice and wisdom and great stories, including the stories that make me cry about Greg Block. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, and keep smiling, Josh.
All right, I most definitely will do so, especially if the Aztecs keep winning in March.
Go Aztecs.
That is Lorena Nava Ruggero. My name is Josh Suchon. I'm your host of the Where You At podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Where You At podcast. This is Devin Watley from the class of 2021. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know where you're at. Tell us about your career. Get involved in the school. There's many ways you can do this, from donating your time or money, mentoring students, to even speaking in classrooms, in person or on Zoom. Your work can help us grow the program and create more opportunities for our students to succeed. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs.